President Obama emphasized for all of us was his desire that we expand our non-traditional partners. And what we have found in our travels is that most of the emerging and developing space nations in the world have two primary interests, those being earth science and remote sensing. And so it's with that in mind that I actually had an opportunity to visit last December with our friends in Hanoi for a very productive meeting and tours with officials from the Vietnam National Satellite Center. And then I went on to Kuala Lumpur, where I attended the Asia Pacific Regional Space Agency's Forum and enjoyed meeting so many of the space agency reps from around the region at that forum. Next week, Dr. Okamura and I will plan to attend the International Astronomical Congress, or IAC, that will be held in Beijing, China, along with leaders of the world space agencies. This will give us a chance to strengthen our global partnership and discuss issues that face the world space community. One of the areas that is growing in importance, particularly for us in the United States, is our commitment to development of strong commercial space industries around the world. This is a big priority for President Obama and for us at NASA. And before I open the floor for questions, I want to acknowledge another upcoming milestone for us in our efforts to turn over transportation of cargo and crew to the International Space Station to private companies. Later today, back in the U.S., a private United States company, Orbital Sciences Corporation, will launch its first demonstration cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station. They'll be launching from NASA's Wallops Flight Facility, America's newest spaceport on the Virginia Eastern Shore, and traveling 17,500 miles per hour. I should have converted that to kilometers per hour for all of you, but I apologize. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 23,000 kilometers per hour into Earth's orbit. They will be carrying orbital Cygnus spacecraft, which will launch on the orbital Antares rocket and deliver approximately 589 kilograms of cargo, including food and clothing, to the Expedition 37 crew. Upon successful completion of this mission, NASA will have 2 U.S. carriers capable of providing cargo resupply missions to the space station. And that remarkable achievement, Orbital and our other commercial partners are enabling a brighter future for space station research. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to field questions from some of you about how your nations can participate in that research. I also want to acknowledge finally the help on this upcoming mission that Orbital Sciences Corporation has been receiving from a Japanese commercial partner, the Mitsubishi Electric Company, or MELCO, under its agreement with Orbital Sciences. They're providing the Proximity Communication System, or PROX, for Cygnus, which will guide the spacecraft in rendezvous and berthing with the International Space Station. So with that, why don't I go ahead and take questions that you all may have.
Thank you, sir. Our first question will be coming from Indonesia this morning, Tempo newspaper, Satria Hadi. Go ahead, Satria, you're on the line. Please state your question.
Okay, good morning.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Hello. Good
morning.
Oh,
good. Very good.
Okay. Yes, this is Mardika from Tempo newspaper and magazine in Jakarta.
Go ahead, state your question.
Okay. I want to ask you 2 questions. First, I want to ask about the latest development of rocket technology. We all know that the SpaceX has successfully created a reusable rocket called Grasshopper. And 20 years ago, NASA had also developed kind of technology to Delta Clipper Experimental, or DCX, although the project was stopped. I want to ask you that what do NASA respond about the success of SpaceX developing a reusable rocket? And what would NASA choose?
And what would NASA choose?
Yes. What would NASA choose? Continuing this latest project purchased by the reusable rocket from the company. And then the second question for me is NASA planning to establish new cooperation with countries in Southeast Asia, especially with Indonesia? And if it's yes, what kind of cooperation would it be? Okay.
Thank you for your question.
Well, Mardika, thanks very much for the question. First of all, SpaceX is one of our commercial partners, as I mentioned earlier, and the Grasshopper that they're developing is an internal development for the company, and it is not something that they're doing in conjunction with NASA. However, we watch their development with great interest, because if they're successful in producing a reusable first stage booster, which is what they intend to do, there may be a use for it down the line. NASA does not have, we are not looking at using a returnable first stage booster at this particular point. You may remember the space shuttle was actually a reusable spacecraft. We got the first stage rockets, which were the solid rocket boosters, back, and we recovered the second stage, which were the shuttle main engines, because they were a part of the vehicle. But we're no longer working with DCX and no longer working with reusable spacecraft, at least not yet. I think your second question was about our future work with Indonesia. Indonesia is very interesting in that they're a country that has great interest in earth science. They're very interested in environmental issues, because they're looking for things that respond to societal needs. And so, like most of our non-traditional partners, I would hope that in the future, NASA would continue to work with Indonesia in the area of earth science and remote sensing.
Thank you very much. I would remind you that you would need to press 9-3 on your handset to queue up for questions. We have on the line journalists from Australia, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Vietnam, Japan, and also some international media as well. So if we have a question, okay, good. From Hanoi, I believe it's from Toi Nay newspaper. Caller, you're on the line. Please state your name and your question for Administrator Bolden. Hello, caller.
Mr. Tucker?
Hello? Hanoi? Hello, is this Hanoi? Can you hear us? Okay. The procedure again to ask calls is to press 9-3 on your handset. You'll be queued up, and then we will release your call. If you are on the line and we do not release you, we can't hear you, so please make sure you queue up. Administrator Bolden, the other question, the initial question from Indonesia, which was on the reusable components of space flight, referred to a previous project that NASA had worked on that you talked about, and I assume that project is now terminated.
The DCX was a project that NASA supported. It was probably a couple of decades ago. Pete Conrad, former NASA Apollo astronaut, was a very integral part of that. The late Pete Conrad. And DCX it looked like it was going to be a relatively successful program. They suffered a takeoff accident, and that essentially ended the program. But so NASA has not engaged in any of the vertically launched and landed reusable vehicles since then.
Thank you for explaining that, sir. Our next caller will be coming from the South China Morning Post. Caller, when we release the queue, please state your name and let us know what your question is. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Stephen with South China Morning.
Yes, a little bit louder, please.
Okay. My question is, what will be on your schedule during your visit in Beijing next week? And because there's some legal complications between the space cooperation between China and the U.S., can you tell us what you think will be the cooperation between China and the U.S. in future, like in international space station? Do you think it is possible that Chinese astronauts can get into the international space station one day, or U.S. astronauts can get into the Chinese space station when it is
Mr. Chen, thank you very much for your question. We're, as I said, we leave here on Friday to come to Beijing for the IAC, and that is actually the primary purpose for my visit to Beijing. The International Astronomical Congress is the largest conference of its type that brings together leaders in fact, brings together not just leaders, but people of multiple nations who are looking at issues of aeronautics and space. My purpose is multifold. I will meet with other heads of agency. We usually use this forum to have an annual heads of agency meeting where we discuss issues of particular importance to the International Space Station. And this year, because we recently released the Global Exploration Roadmap, my guess is we will spend quite a bit of time discussing how we coordinate our efforts such that we fully support the provisions of the Global Exploration Roadmap. We have another international conference upcoming in Washington, D.C. in January, the International Exploration Forum that will be hosted by the U.S. State Department and the President's Office of Science and Technology Policy, a ministerial level meeting, and we're hoping to have representatives from many nations at that conference also to talk about our future in exploration. My position as the NASA administrator is to lead, and I will be a little bit pompous here, to lead what I consider to be the greatest space agency in the world. We are the largest and most successful space agency today, and so my job is to try to lead us so that we continue to be the leaders for the world in the exploration of our universe. We also support any nation that seeks peaceful utilization of space, and that goes for everyone. So I think that's what we'll be talking about when I come to Beijing.
Thank you very much, Administrator Bolden. The next question we have will be coming from the Kyushu Institute of Technology here in Fukuoka, Japan. I would remind all callers to queue up by pressing 9-3 on your handset, and we'll get to you in order that you queue up. So this call, sir, will be coming from Kyushu. Caller, you're on the line. Please state your name. Kyushu, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, hi. Can you speak a little louder, please? Thank you.
Dr. Yonemoto, is that you?
Oh, yes. My name is Yonemoto.
Okay, go ahead with your question, sir.
My name is Koichi Yonemoto, teaching space engineering at the Kyushu Institute of Technology in Japan. I have been involved in the Japanese unmanned shuttle program for about 10 years, named HOPE, and now I am teaching in a university. And Kyushu Institute of Technology is now conducting an unmanned Bolden wing rocket development in collaboration with the University of Texas at El Paso. The wing rocket will be launched in the U.S. and reach space, I hope, for 5 years. And I have one very, very simple question about the program of suborbital and how the university can participate in those kind of programs in the U.S. Since cost, as the former president, turns out one of the very successful programs, and NASA has launched after that Space Taxi program with the budget of $1,600 million US, and recently commercial reusable suborbital research for about $70 million US effort. And I heard that there are many U.S. universities participate in the latter commercial reusable suborbital program now. And it is true is the first question. And now, could you please tell me what kind of role of the university in U.S. To participate in those kind of programs, and what do you expect from the university? Is my second question.
Dr. Yonemoto, I think you referred to the University of Texas El Paso as a partner, and if that's correct, UT El Paso has been a long-time partner with NASA. We contract with them for a number of different areas. And you are accurate when you say you talk about their involvement in suborbital programs. I think what you're going to find, you don't hear a lot of conversation about suborbital space but much of NASA's activity is actually done in the suborbital arena. The Wallops Flight Facility, where Antares is going to launch later today, in the past has been utilized mostly for sounding rockets and other suborbital flights. There are places like the spaceport in New Mexico. If you go out to California, Mojave, down in Matagordo County in Texas, these are all areas that I think are going to emerge as leading spaceports for suborbital flight. It is my hope that sometime early this coming year, Virgin Galactic will become the first commercial company to fly in suborbital space carrying passengers. They're scheduled to fly Spaceship Two on the White Knight. It's actually carried into high altitude on board the White Knight, where it's dropped, and then it ignites its rocket, flies into the very edges of space, and then comes back and lands on a runway. That will be suborbital passenger flight and the opening of the era of commercial space flight for tourists. So I'm very excited about that. We have a space grant university in every state of the union, so there are 50 space grant universities that participate as the leader for what we call the Space Grant Consortium, and we spend an extensive amount of money there each year to support NASA programs in those universities, dominantly in STEM education, but some research through our Space Technology Mission Directorate and our Science Mission Directorate.
Thank you, Mr. Bolden. We have a caller from Australia National University. Caller, please state your name and ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, this is Brad Tucker. I'm at Maelstrom Observatory in Canberra. One of the things we're interested in this side is more the science space mission side. So the NASA small and medium Explorer programs have been quite successful in the past 5 to 10 years. A lot of these satellites have lasted their length. So what's the current vision of continuing that program, and where do other nations, specifically nations like Japan and Australia, are really ramping up their science and space satellites program fall into place?
Brad, thanks very much for the question, and I had an opportunity to visit Canberra.
Hold on, please.
Brad, how are you hearing now?
Yep.
Okay. I had an opportunity to visit Canberra about 2 years ago. I was visiting the satellite tracking facility there, and I'm very proud to say that our brothers and sisters down there in Canberra are very uniquely placed in that they not only brought the very first signals of humans on the moon with Apollo 11, but they happened to be in just the right position such that when Curiosity landed on Mars, the initial signals from Mars with Curiosity came through the tracking station at Canberra. I think you referred to extended missions, and that is, you're absolutely right. Our satellites are generally built to a certain standard, and when we plan them for 5 years, the good and bad is they usually last 5 or 6 times that length. I say the good and bad. It's bad because it costs money to keep operating them and bringing the data down. It's good because it does allow scientists and students in universities around the world to do more studies and use these tremendous instruments that turn out to be very good. I recently had a conversation with one of our advisory committees on science where we're trying to determine what's the right mix of extended missions and new opportunities. In other words, new satellites that we launch to do research. But you will find, I think, that most of our what we call the non-traditional partners. You asked, Japan is not a non-traditional partner by any stretch of the imagination, but a number of the other Southeast Asia region countries are. And coming on board with some of the extended missions that are already into operation gives their scientists an opportunity to get data from very successful programs such that they can gradually get into the world of spacefaring nations and do their research. So we will continue to do that to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you, sir. I would remind those on the call, we have about time for 1 or 2 more questions. If you have a question, please press 9-3 on your handset to queue up. Administrator Bolden will be here in Tokyo tomorrow, and then he'll be traveling on from here, but we're glad to have him. Sir, just real quickly, if you could talk a little bit about the future of manned space exploration.
We be glad to do that. In fact, we get questions a lot about it's too bad that NASA is no longer involved in human spaceflight. And I have to correct people. We've been involved in human spaceflight for almost 50 years now without interruption, except for the very brief time after the Apollo program when we were transitioning to shuttle. And you know, even after the Columbia accident, we continued to pursue human spaceflight and operate on the International Space Station because we were able to turn to our Russian partners to continue to get our crews to and from the International Space Station. So although shuttle didn't fly for about 3 years, we continued to operate normally on the International Space Station, and that's the case today. We are very active on the International Space Station with a normal crew of 6 on board. Right now we have 3 crew members there waiting for the arrival of the next increment in a week or so. But there is extensive research dominantly geared toward trying to solve some of the problems that we know we have in getting humans on long-duration missions such as going to Mars. We have an asteroid initiative that's coming up that will use the International Space Station as a sort of as a toehold on the universe as we develop the technologies needed to be able to travel the distances that are required to get to an asteroid and then on to Mars. We are beginning to expand our utilization on the International Space Station and bringing in more nations than have ever participated before. At one time, we had as many as 65 different nations who had some form of participation on the International Space Station, and that's actually what we want to do. We want to use it as a vehicle for non-traditional nations to do the kind of research in low Earth orbit that they might not otherwise be able to do. We're working diligently to be able to launch our astronauts from U.S. soil within the next few years. We have 3 American companies, SpaceX, Boeing, and Sierra Nevada, that are producing their own designed and built vehicles and vying for NASA certification and contract. I already mentioned that we have SpaceX, and hopefully at the end of the day, we'll have Orbital Sciences that will be providing routine, reliable access to space from U.S. soil, which is important to us.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from the Science Magazine correspondent here in Tokyo, Japan. Caller, if you're on the line, please state your name and question. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dennis Normile of Science Magazine. Mr. Bolden, I would like to ask, are you expecting any specific agreements or any sort of cooperative arrangements to result from the meetings in Beijing next week? And are you, this week here in Japan, are you pursuing any specific initiatives with your Japanese counterparts?
The work here in Tokyo, and today we have an extensive schedule visiting with members of the Diet and other people in the government. Our primary focus in being here is to support our partners in JAXA, but also to try to help the Japanese government wrestle with the same problems that we are facing in America. Everyone's suffering from very difficult economic times, but we're trying to emphasize the critical importance of the International Space Station and the partnerships that have been rock solid for many years now. So trying to shore up those partnerships and make sure that the International Space Station can continue to function at least through 2020 because it is our toehold on the universe, as I mentioned, and it's key for the development of the technologies and understanding the human body the way we need to if we're going to continue to go to asteroids and to Mars. In China, it will be a continuation of that same effort, as I mentioned, meeting with the heads of our international partners on the International Space Station, as well as the heads of some agencies that don't participate on the station, but with whom we have other partnerships. We went over 600 in the total number of active international agreements that we have recently, and the 2 nations that have the most are Germany and France. But Japan is right behind that in 3rd place, and I forget the count, but I think it's about 60 some odd agreements that we have with various entities here in Japan, and 30 of those are with JAXA. So 40 total. I'm being corrected, so but it's a lot.
Thank you, sir. We're right out of time, but I wanted to ask you if you could wrap up with something about climate change and talk a little bit about NASA's atmospheric monitoring and the work we're doing not only in this part of the world, but also on the polar ice projects that you work on. I think that's of great interest to folks here in the region.
I sure can, Paul, and thanks very much for the question. Paul gave me that question because he used to be in Chile and he had an opportunity to fly with us on something we call Ice Bridge, which is absolutely fantastic. Since most of you come from or representing nations that are emerging partners for NASA, as I mentioned at the outset of this session, most of your countries are interested in earth science. They're very interested in climate change because we all suffer from torrential rains and floods and droughts and the like, and we're trying to figure out how to best deal with those. So NASA has a significant number of Earth-orbiting satellites that we use to provide climate change data, not just to NASA, but to researchers around the world, to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States, to the Department of the Interior, the Landsat satellites that are looking at our forests and the like. But an extensive amount of our work is actually done in the atmosphere through airplane overflights carrying sensors very similar to those that are on satellites. And what we have found, for example, in studying the polar regions, both North and South Pole, is that while satellites are very good, we can, now that we have unmanned vehicles like Global Hawk that can fly for as much as 60 hours at a time without refueling, we can dwell over a region and do a lot of studies that have to do with the melting of the glaciers, the warming of both poles, and what impact that potentially will have for many of the nations in on this call. When I look at Indonesia, Japan, Vietnam, all areas that have extensive coastlines that will be impacted in the next decade with the rising sea level, areas of your coast that will no longer be above water 10 years from now. We want to understand what's happening so that we can work with your governments and help them more with planning how to deal with the changes in the climate as opposed to reacting when disasters occur. So that's what we try to do as much as we can, Paul. Thanks very much for the question.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to offer any wrap-up comments as we conclude today?
I would say it's Japanese-centric, but for those of you in the Asia-Pacific region, you should all be very proud for your sister nation, Japan, next spring. This coming November, we're going to launch Koichi Wakata, a Japanese astronaut. This will actually be his second stay aboard the International Space Station. He is a veteran space flyer, but Koichi next spring, after his first 3 months, will spend his final 3 months as the commander of the International Space Station. That will be the first time that someone from the Asia-Pacific region, the first time a Japanese particularly, has served as the commander of the International Space Station, and that's a big deal. So hopefully all of you in the region will celebrate. Hopefully it will be big news, and I hope that there will be big signs in Hong Kong and Beijing and Tokyo and Kuala Lumpur and Bangkok and everywhere celebrating the fact that a native of the Asia-Pacific region is in charge of the International Space Station and leading its team of international partners.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today, and thank you for our callers for participating. We look forward to our next event. Good night.